students, hope you are doing well. Welcome once again to the course that is a current regulatory requirement for conducting clinical trial in India for new drug version 2. So, today we are going to discuss about the phases of clinical trial, the forms given in the act, rules and the fees in our lecture 6A. The expected outcome from this lecture, the learners will come to know the definition of clinical trial as we have seen earlier also, then the different phases of clinical trials, the different forms required for the application to the central licensing authority and the different forms in which the permission is to be granted, then the fees required and some important things which is required to be known while applying to the central licensing authority. So, let us start one by one with the definition of clinical trial. We have seen earlier also in our lecture 3 the definition of clinical trial. So, the definition of clinical trial is given in the rule 2W. The clinical trial in relation to a new drug or investigational new drug means any systematic study of such new drug or investigational new drug in human subject to generate data for discovering or verifying its clinical, pharmacological including pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics. Also it covers the determination of adverse effect with the objective of determining safety, efficacy or tolerability of such new drug or the investigational new drug. Moving towards the phases of clinical trial. So, there are around 5 phases, starts from phase 0 to phase 4. Phase 0 is called microdosing study or microdose phase. Phase 1 is human or clinical pharmacological trial. Phase 2 is therapeutic exploratory trial. Phase 3 is therapeutic confirmatory trial and phase 4 is the last phase which is a post marketing trials. We will see one by one all these phases. So, the phase 0 study, the phase 0 study it is also called a microdosing study. Phase 0 studies are done in a small sample size population. The small size that is in comparison to the phase 1. The purpose of this phase is to help speed up and streamline the drug approval process. Phase 0 studies often use few small doses of a new drug. So, the dose used in this phase 0 is very small, that is why it is called as a microdosing. And as such there is no requirement of this phase in India. So, in India it starts from the phase 1 after completion of the preclinical study, but in some regulatory authorities like USA and other countries the phase 0 is also required to avoid the unnecessary exposure of the large population. The next phase is phase 1. Phase 1 study it is also called as human or clinical pharmacological trial. The objective of this phase 1 study is the estimation of safety and tolerability of the drug. This phase is not having any therapeutic objective as it is the determination of safety and tolerability of the drug in the human subject. This may involve one or combination of objectives such as maximum tolerated dose, then pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic or early measurement of the drug activity. The phase 1 study, what we call it as human or clinical pharmacological trials, it is preferably done by a trained investigator in a clinical pharmacology, and in this phase healthy subjects are mostly used unless there is a specific requirement to use the patients. In certain type of cases like if the drug is having potential toxicity like a drug for anti-cancer use or any other drug which are used in the life threatening cases, and if there is no alternative then the healthy subject are not unnecessarily exposed to the this toxic or potential toxic drugs. So, that is why the patients are also used. This is the phase in which the first administration of IND into human subject is carried out. So, this drug, when it is a investigational new drug, if it has not been used elsewhere in the world, so this would be the first administration, because before this phase 1, if it is not a phase 0, then it is a preclinical study. So, that is why we call it as first administration of IND into human subject. As compared to other phases, phase 2, phase 3, this phase is also having a small subject population. Let us see phase 2 study. The phase 2 study, it is also called as a therapeutic exploratory trials, and the objective of this study is to evaluate effectiveness of a drug for a particular indication. This study is also involve the determination of short term side effects and the risk associated with the drug. To determine dose and regimen for further studies in phase 2 or phase 3. So, in this study the dose also has been determined, dose and the regimen, which will be useful for conducting the phase 3 study. Let us see phase 3 study. Phase 3 study is also called as a therapeutic confirmatory trial, because whatever the indication or the therapeutic activity that has been ascertained into the phase 2 study, that has to be confirmed through the phase 3 study. That is why this phase 3 study is conducted. So, the purpose is demonstration or confirmation of the therapeutic benefit, to confirm that drug is safe and effective for use. So, already the safety and efficacy is established in phase 1, phase 2, but here again to confirm that the drug is safe and effective in a larger population, this phase 3 is conducted. This phase 3 is required to provide the basis for marketing approval. So, in India, before marketing the drug, the phase 3 is mandatory. Even though the drug is manufactured into the country, or if it has to be imported from the another country, then the phase 3 conduct is mandatory, and it will provide the basis for marketing approval, as the population involved in the phase 3 clinical trial is little bit more than the phase 1 and phase 2 study. It is to also to explore the dose response relationship. So, what is the dose and response, that is also ascertained in this phase 3 study. Then use of drug in wider population, as I have mentioned, in different stages of diseases or in combination with other drug. So, after the satisfactory result of the phase 3 studies, then it comes the phase 4 study. Let us see what is means by the phase 4 study. Phase 4 study is also called as a post marketing study or PMS study. Phase 4 trial is after the approval of the drug and related to the approved indication. So, as I have mentioned, the phase 3 is mandatory for getting the approval from the licensing authority. So, once the approval has been obtained, that approval may be with the condition of the phase 4 trial, or it may not require at the time of drug approval. Phase 4 trial may include additional drug-drug interaction, dose response or safety studies and trial design to support use under the approved indication. Once the indication has been approved, then this study goes beyond the dose response relationship, and it is in the wider population after marketing the drug. For example, to see the mortality or morbidity studies, then to see the epidemiological studies, etc. It is in much wider population and go beyond safety and efficacy study, which is not seen earlier in the phase 3, 2 and 1 with respect to the dose and food action, with respect to the climate action, with respect to the genetic variation and the dose. So, all these studies to be carried out in this phase. Post marketing assessment of new drug may be carried out in different ways. So, there are the ways to carry out the phase 4 or post marketing trial. First is the phase 4 post marketing trial. So, this post marketing trial, if the condition has been mentioned in the approval after the phase 3, then the phase 4 with the permission of the central licensing authority, it has to be carried out with a design protocol with the approval of the licensing authority, with the permission of the ethics committee, and having defined number of subject and with the proper scientific design. Then post marketing surveillance or observational or non-interventional study for the active surveillance. To find out the adverse effect or to find out how the drug is behaving in the wider population, the post marketing surveillance also can be carried out. The last is the post marketing surveillance through periodic safety update report. Means wherever the drug has been distributed and given to the patients, the surveillance what happens with that patients in accordance to the physicians, those who have prescribed the drug, that survey has to be carried out whether the drug has caused any toxicity or whether it has not been tolerated or any unwanted side effects which have not been estimated in the phase 1, 2 and 3, that has to be ascertained, and the periodic safety update report, it is required to be submitted to the licensing authority. Now, which are the forms which require to be submitted to the licensing authority if the applicant require the permission or approval to conduct a clinical trials, and the associated fees. So, you can see the slides, there are many forms. I have already mentioned in our lecture first and second that earlier only the form 44 was there, now there are around 27 forms. You can see the slides. The CT1 form, it is the form application for registration or renewal of ethics committee relating to clinical trial or bioavailability, bioequivalence study or biomedical health research. So, this is the form which is required, in which the applicant has to be apply for the registration or renewal for both of ethics committee. Here it is only the form which is required for the registration of ethics committee, which has to be registered with the CDSCO, and the registration of the ethics committee for biomedical and health research, which is to be applied into the Ministry Department of DHR. Next is the CT02 form. It is for the grant of registration of ethics committee relating to clinical trial or bioavailability and bioequivalence study. So, this is when you apply in the CT01 form, then if your documents are all satisfactory, then the registration of ethics committee can be given in the CT2 forms. CT3 is the grant of registration of ethics committee relating to biomedical health research. So, for the biomedical health research, the ethics committee should be there, and form for this application form is CT1, but the permission or the registration in two different form. If it is related to the clinical trial, then CT2, and if it is related to the biomedical health, then it is a CT3. You can see in the slide there is no fees for the application and for the registration of the ethics committee. Next is the CT4 form. It is for the application for grant of permission to conduct clinical trial of new drug or the investigational new drug. So, this is the important form which you require to file to the licensing authority for the grant of permission to conduct clinical trial. So, if it is for phase 1, then the fees is rupees 3 lakh, then if it is for phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4, the fees is 2 lakh for each trial. CT4A, it is related to the information to initiate clinical trial of new drug or IND as a part of discovery, research and manufacture in India. So, we have seen in our other lecture, if the licensing authority do not communicate anything within the timeline prescribed, then it is considered as a deemed approval, and if the applicant has obtained such a deemed approval, then he has to inform into the form 4A. So, in this case also there is no fee. The next form is CT5U. It is application for grant of permission to conduct bioavailability or bioequivalence study So, this is earlier it was not there, the bioavailability, bioequivalence and clinical trial, it was the same form. Now, these forms has been separated. CT5 is particularly for the conduct of bioavailability or bioequivalence study, and the fee associated with this is 2 lakh rupees. The CT6, it is the form for permission to conduct clinical trial of new drug or investigational new drug. When you apply for the clinical trial, you will obtain the permission in CT6 form. CT7 is the permission to conduct bioavailability or bioequivalence study of new drug or the IND. We have seen there is a separate form for the application and there is a separate form for the obtaining the permission of bioequivalence study. CT8 form is the application for registration or renewal of BAB study center. So, earlier we have seen that is for the bioavailability and bioequivalence study, and this is the application for the BAB study center, and the fees associated with this is 5 lakh rupees per study center. CT9 is the grant of registration of bioavailability or bioequivalence study center. So, after satisfactory document submission, you will get the registration of study center in CT9 form. CT10 is the application for grant of permission to manufacture new drug or IND for clinical trial or BAB study or for examination, test and analysis. So, this is actually a form to manufacture small quantities of the drug for clinical trial or for the bioavailability study or the any other test and analysis. We can call it as a application for the test license. The fees for this is 5,000 per product, and CT11 is the permission to manufacture new drug or IND for clinical trial, BAB study or for examination, test and analysis. So, once you apply for this test license, you will get the test license to manufacture small quantities of the drug which is not approved. So, you will get a permission in CT11. CT12 is the application for grant of permission to manufacture formulation of unapproved active pharmaceutical ingredient for test or analysis or clinical trial or BAB study. If it is not approved and if you would like to have a test license to manufacture small quantities, then you have to apply into the CT12. The fees is again same 5,000 rupees per product. CT13 is the form for application for grant of permission to manufacture unapproved active pharmaceutical ingredient for development of formulation for test or product for test and analysis or clinical trial or BAB study. Again this is for the unapproved manufacture for the unapproved drug, and the fees is also same, that is 5,000 per product. CT14 is the permission for this application, that is permission to manufacture formulation of unapproved API for test or analysis or clinical trial or bioavailability or bioequivalence study. CT15 is permission to manufacture unapproved API for the development of formulation for test or analysis or clinical trial or BAB study. Moving to the next form, that is a CT16. It is the application for grant of license to import new drugs or IND for clinical trial or BAB study for examination, test and analysis. So, this is also a test license, but in case of the import of small quantities of the drug, then you have to apply in the CT16. The fees is the same, that is 5,000 per product. CT17 is the license to import new drug or IND for the purpose of clinical trial or BAB study for examination, test and analysis. So, this is the test license you will obtain from the licensing authority to import small quantities of the drug for the purpose of clinical trial or the bioavailability and bioequivalence study. CT18 is the application for grant of permission to import new drug for sale or for distribution. So, this is the application for grant of permission to import new drug, and it is for the sale or for the distribution. The fees is 5 lakh rupees. Then CT 19, it is permission to import new API for sale or distribution. So, you will get the permission to import a new API for the sale and distribution. Next is a CT 19, permission to import new API, we have seen this. CT 20 is a permission to import pharmaceutical formulation of new drug for sale or for distribution. So, earlier we have seen this is for the active pharmaceutical ingredient, that is API, we can call it bulk drug also. CT 20 is particularly permission to import a pharmaceutical formulation, that is a dosage form, and it is for the purpose of sale and distribution. CT 21 is the application for grant of permission to manufacture new drug for formulation for sale or for distribution. The fees is again it is a 5 lakh rupees. So, this is the application for manufacture. Earlier we have seen the form is for the import. Then CT 22, you will get the permission to manufacture new API for sale or distribution. So, this CT 22, it is a permission to manufacture new API. CT 23 is a permission to manufacture pharmaceutical formulation of new drug for sale or distribution. So, this is a for the dosage form, that is a final dosage form, permission to manufacture. So, we can keep in mind these forms are particularly for the conduct of the CT, different form, then conduct of the BEB study is a different form, then for the manufacture of the small quantities for the test and analysis there is a different form, and for the import of the small quantities again there is different form, import of the small quantities of API and import of the quantities for sale and distribution, again it is given that manufacture of the quantities for the sale and distribution. Likewise, these forms have been separated. CT 24 is application for license to import unapproved new drug for treatment of patient of life threatening disease in government hospital or government medical institutions. So, this CT 24 it is the application if the institution or any hospital or medical college, if they would like to import a small quantity for the treatment of the patient who is suffering from life threatening diseases or any other diseases, and if the drug is not available in the India, then for the small quantity they can apply into the CT 24, and the fees associated is given here. The CT 25 is a license to import unapproved new drug for treatment of patient of life threatening disease in government hospital or medical institute. So, you will get the license to import such a drug for the purpose of treatment of the patient in the CT 25. So, these are the provision made to avoid the what we can say to avoid the lengthy procedure of getting the drug imported or getting the drug manufactured, and to avoid the fees which is huge in. So, you can import the small quantity for the patient, that is why they have it has been given the separate forms. CT 26 is the application for grant of permission to manufacture unapproved new drug, but under clinical trial for treatment of patient of life threatening disease in government hospital or medical institutions. So, this provision has also been made. Then CT 27 is the permission to manufacture unapproved new drug, but under clinical trial for treatment of patient of life threatening disease in government hospital. Even the drug is not approved in the outside country, but it has shown some results in the clinical trial, that also can be imported under the permission in CT 27. Then we have seen in our last chapter of the new drug and clinical trial, the provision for pre-submission meeting, post-submission meeting has been given to guide applicant, and the fees given is for the pre-submission meeting it is 5 lakh rupees, and for the post-submission once the application has been submitted to the licensing authority, and if it requires some guidance suggestions, then the fees is 50,000. Any other application which is not specified above. So, if anything has not been covered in these applications, then the he can apply in the applications, and the fees associated with this is 50,000. So, the note is given here that no fees shall be chargeable in respect of application for conduct of clinical trial for orphan drug as defined in clause 10 of rule 2. So, if it is the application for the orphan drug, then there would be no fees for the clinical trial. Further, in case of application received from MSME, that is from micro, small, medium enterprises firms for conduct of clinical trial, approval of new drug and pre and post submission meeting, the fee payable shall be half of the fee specified above. So, to motivate these small companies, medium companies, the fees has been given half of the fees whatever mentioned above. So, some things we require to know, and these are important while applying for the clinical trial. What are these things? Let us see. For new drug substances discovered in India, clinical trial is required to be conducted right from phase 1. So, if the drug product has been discovered in India, after the preclinical, the applicant has to conduct the phase 1 study, then he can go further. For a new drugs which is approved outside the India, the drug which is not approved in the India and it has been approved, discovered outside the India, the phase 3 studies need to be carried out to generate evidence of safety and efficacy of drug in Indian patient when used as recommended in the prescribing information. We have seen in our earlier slides also the phase 3 is mandatory. Even though the drug is available in the market outside the country, to confirm the therapeutic indications and whether it is suitable for the Indian patients or not, the applicant required to conduct a phase 3 study. For a new drug approved outside India, phase 3 studies may be waived off with certain condition like a post marketing studies. If the drug is approved outside the India and if it is, for example, for the life threatening diseases or for the orphan, if it is a orphan drug, in such cases case to case basis it can be phase 3 can be waived off, but with the condition to conduct a post marketing study. So, this is about lecture 6A. Let us have the summary of this lecture, what we have seen. So, in this lecture we have seen first the what is means by clinical trial, then phases of clinical trial we have seen from phase 0 to phase 4. Phase 0 is microdosing which is not available in India, phase 4 is post marketing after the approval of the drug for the marketing. Then we have seen various forms required for different application, the forms required for the conduct of the clinical trial, the forms required for the manufacture, the forms required for the test license, the forms required for the import, and the forms which are required for import of the drug for the patient by government institutions. Then we have seen various fees required for different phases of clinical trials and for the different applications. Then we have seen the criteria for phase 3 waiver if it is the drug is available in the well regulated country, and if the drug is for life threatening diseases, if there is no alternative in India, then in such cases with the phase 4 condition, it may or may not be phase 4 conditions, so that phase 3 can be waived off. Then we have seen criteria for drug discovered in India and outside India. So, this is about the our lecture 6A. Now, it is the time for the question. just to check your memory. The question first is, which phase of clinical trial is required prior to marketing of the drug in India? I have mentioned many of the times. So, it is the phase 3. Phase 3 is mandatory before the marketing. Which phase is called microdosing phase? So, as the name indicate, it is a micro, it is a phase 0. So, this is about lecture 6A. We will again see you in our next lecture. Till then, you take care. Bye bye and all the best. Thank you.